This is Grimm Grinner on all channels.
The Badlands River, run through corporations is an insidious agent. Fire and stun gates, devastation to the wastes, the desolated. Do not trust him.
Welcome to the wastes. Good evening, Wasteland. This is Grimm Grinner broadcasting from the bunker on all channels. It's been a while since I last put out any sort of transmissions. Thanks to the ominous voice that is still on loop, calling me a warlord and a menace, and claiming I've adopted all these different personas to terrorize the wastes, I've had to go into hiding. As much as Mama Coog and a few other close friends are sure that this is some sort of hoax cooked up by the corporations or the judge or any of the people that I may have pissed off out there, we determined that it wouldn't be safe for me to stick around any longer. The risk to people I care about, along with various innocent wastelanders, is just too high. So, for now at least, I've been banished from Burblack. CJ and a couple other wastelanders volunteered to come with me, but with how valuable they are, I chose to be the only one banished. Of course, CJ knows where I am, and while she still has a responsibility to Burblack and helping out with stuff there, she's found ways to get me supplies and even brought me some of the equipment from the network under the radar so I can continue to broadcast out, as well as keeping her on the static for any signs of who's behind this. This isolation has certainly been tough, but I have received some messages in various forms showing support, which has made it a slight bit more bearable. Some smaller communities have reached out, not necessarily for me to be able to set up shop, but at least to work as an independent courier of sorts with promises of aid in whatever ways possible. Offers of help with information, weapons, tech, supplies, and smaller tokens of appreciation for what I've been trying to do out here mean that not everyone believes this broadcast. And that means a lot. But with everything that's going on, I also want to try and set the record straight. Now, the aliases and crimes that transmission is accusing me of are out and out not true. I mean, some things are just straight up impossible, like me being the desolate king, since I would have had to be way farther south during his reign, but also at least a few years older than I am now. Some of the others feel like more personal attacks, make me feel as if this person or group knows even more than they're letting on. Like bringing up Haven in one of the updated versions, or accusing me of being the Badlands Ripper. And that's why the judge has shown up. Like he's some sort of sick fanboy or something. And I can say, without a doubt, and with at least half a dozen different wastelanders that can vouch for the fact that there is no way that I could be what this mystery voice claims. But, and this is the big part, that doesn't clear me of the sins I have in my past. I very easily could have gone down a different path than I'm on now and become a very different version of the raiders and warlords that have tormented the wastes. I've already spoken of my guilt regarding the destruction of Haven, and I've run with some dangerous groups here and there and done things which I don't know if I can ever fully atone for. If I'm going to seek any sort of redemption for anything I've done, I guess I should start with simply owning up to some of the worst things. So, I've talked before about my time at the Dripping Rose, then meeting Praxis, and from there I mentioned how I worked with Balasar and the Phoenix Express. But that's not the entire story. It wasn't just a straight shot from Praxis to being a courier. It was probably about a year and a half in between, where I lost myself to being someone other than Grimm Grinner. where I went by the name Sickle. If anyone out there is familiar with that name, I'm sorry for everything that person did, and whatever lasting damage I may have caused. Sickle was the name I adopted when I joined up with a band of mercenaries calling themselves the Vanished. I had been approached by a member of them not long after my journey with Praxis, and had hit a rough patch. Scavenging was getting sparse, and the threat of running into a swarm of ferals and being unable to get away was a very real possibility. Then along came a pair of brothers, Slice and Dice. They hoisted me up and brought me to the Vanished base, which was set up in an old abandoned stadium somewhere in the Badlands. It was there that I met the head of the Mercs, a real bastard everyone called Geist. He kept everyone in the Vanished in line with an assortment of increasingly horrible tactics, including threats of being thrown into the fighting pit nicknamed the Donnybrook. For the next month and a half or so, that's where I survived. All the new recruits were tossed in with a scattering of weapons and had to fight for Geist and the rest of the gang's entertainment, sometimes against ferals or each other, but it was almost always to the death, or as long as it was funny. Somehow, a small cluster of us were able to survive as a team through a bunch of the fights and began to be allowed certain luxuries, I guess, like better food scraps, weapons that were actually sharp. That was where I earned the name Sickle. It was the weapon I chose as it seemed the most sharp, and I wanted to make any kills as quick as possible. Anyways, after a few weeks in the Donnybrook, I was brought before Geist alongside a couple other recruits, and we were anointed, as it were. Having passed through the flames of surviving the wastes and our baptism in blood, we were each given a marker naming us official mercenaries in his service. From then on, we did jobs he issued based on skills we exhibited. I was marked as a dagger and given some of the more cunning and risky jobs. Not necessarily killing anyone, but trusted to do what I needed to do. Mostly just getting in places, getting what we needed, maybe taking out a high priority target if that was the actual job itself, but I was the quiet, roguish type. Muscle like Slice and Dice did the bigger jobs, clearing out camps or making sure a group worked well. But sometimes Geist needed work I later found out would be on behalf of the corporations. As much as the elite creeps are great at clearing entire camps off the map, corporations always have and still very much like to use mercs for the less than pleasant jobs. Mostly because then they can deny any claims from inside the walls that they are what we all know them to be. They can also then send an elite squad to deal with the mercs if they need to silence anyone, which helps keep their manipulations going strong. I hate to say that I was integral to more than a handful of jobs like that. I had a particular knack for getting the leaders of some of the smaller camps to simply hand over their security measures so that our client could come by and make their case. Of course, their case was taking those innocent people to the tower and 86ing anyone who didn't go along. Sometimes whole camps were dusted. The only record of them was a swift red X on a map. It took a long while before I was informed of what was happening, and who our biggest paying client was. Of course, I had misgivings about working for the same shitbags that had launched a siege on my former home. So when I was made aware of our affiliations with the corporations, I started hatching a plan to get myself out of there, and fast. That's the problem with joining up with a band of mercenaries like the Vanished. Getting out doesn't happen, not unless you're ghosted, which I didn't intend on having happen. I had to play things smart. I knew that I couldn't just leave, and either taking on Geist or faking my death wouldn't happen unless I could put some distance between me and the rest of them. That was when it clicked for me to try and pick up a job in the area that I knew better than the Badlands. If I could get back to the Terrio neck of the woods, I could easily disappear. Vanishing from the vanished. I approached Geist with a scrawled bounty I was able to conveniently dig out of a pile of old missions that hadn't been successful. One for a certain brothel owner who was of interest to the corporations. Geist was skeptical, but when I mentioned history with the Dripping Rose, he changed his tune. Figured that I could likely get in there and get out without any trouble, and even hinted at the idea of me bringing a few of the workers back to camp for some fun. That comment, of course, made my blood boil. I almost stuck him right there. I should have. But I went along with it. I was able to get some supplies and a bike for the trek out. Of course, I was met with Geist's blessing of
4 days once you cross the border. Then your ship becomes free reign and it's back in the Donnybrook. And we'll send a team to finish what you can't.
wasn't the most ideal scenario, since the prospect of a team coming by to confirm the kill would defeat the point of me disappearing. So I would have to work fast and figure out either stopping them coming or make a stand to send a message back to Geist. I made it to the Dripping Rose about a day and a half after passing the border, with a stop by to see Praxis, who was already well on his way to building up the animated broom at that point. He, of course, agreed to help in whatever way he could, and I jumped at the opportunity to accept the assistance. It took a small bit more convincing to get the madam on board with resisting a mercenary assault. Luckily, Libby and some of the other workers were more than willing to help, so the madam came around when she heard what Geist had in mind for the Dripping Rose after collecting this bounty. The next couple days were filled with getting some of the fortifications in place that hadn't been used since the ferals had been cleared out of the area, and nervous tension. Most of the folks there could handle themselves in a fight, but no one knew what to expect from mercenaries like this. When the team of Vanish showed up, we were built up and ready. Although I wasn't ready for Geist himself to be leading the pack. Praxis had his sights trained on him the whole time we spoke. I'm still surprised that things didn't end in a firefight. I think something in Geist understood that I wanted out, and despite me being so apparently valued, he was willing to let me go, provided I never entered their territory so long as he ran the Vanished. That decree was marked with my signature sickle being lodged into the gate of the Dripping Rose, where it stayed until that old spot fell last year. Ever since, I've tried to steer clear of Vanished territory, even when I was more actively operating with the Phoenix Express, and more recently when we were trying to clear out some pathways through the Badlands. But what's the point in this story, Grimm? I hear that disembodied voice asking. Well, mysterious voice that no one else hears, my point is this. With the world the way it is, certain a decent amount of those of us remaining in the wastes have done things in order to survive that we wish we hadn't. Whether it's killing to ensure that you have some shelter, or leaving someone behind to escape ferals or raiders. Or, in my case, joining up with corporate-funded mercenaries and causing the devastation of several camps and settlements in the Badlands. But in this wild wasteland we all live in, there's still a chance for redemption, and opportunities to hopefully atone for your sins. I don't know if I can ever be fully forgiven, or if I can balance my scales for what I've done. But that isn't going to stop me from trying, and it shouldn't stop any of you either. Well, Wastelands, I've rambled enough for one night. I'm just hoping to straighten things out and get back to helping people instead of being on the run and hiding to keep people I care about safe. This has been Grimm Grinner, broadcasting on all channels. See you in the wastes. Welcome to The Wastes is a Wasteland podcast brought to you by Edward Grimm Grinner Hutchinson. Feel free to follow me on all social media and make sure to subscribe so you can hear new episodes as they release. If you like what I do here and want to support the podcast by getting some cool merch, check out my Etsy store. For more information and all the links, check out linktree.com/welcome to the wastes. Thanks for listening.